Hello everyone, my name is Ashish and you are watching another of my YouTube channel. In this video, we are going to create this awesome newsletter sign up form with React and Firebase, and we'll be using Glassmorphism UI for this. And let me show you the working. So you can see that if I submit some emails, so abc@123.com, and if I click on submit, you can see that we get this message which automatically goes off. And if we check our Firebase database, if we refresh this, you can see that we have a collection emails, and here we can see that we have added the email as well as the timestamp when we have added the email. So I hope you're excited to make this. So without wasting any time, let's get started. So as usual, I'm using my VS Code text editor with the Chrome browser, and I have run the npx create react app command, and I have also got rid of all the test files and the CSS files which are not needed. So now we have this empty app component to start with. The first thing which we are going to do is to create a form for accepting our user input and a submit button. So let's do that. We'll create a form. And here we'll say input, the type will be email, and we don't need this name or ID. And now we are going to create a button which will be a submit button. If we save this and if we refresh this, you can see that we have this input box and we need to write submit here. Like this. Now to capture the input, we need to create a state. So we'll say import useState from React, like this. And here we'll create const input and set input. We'll set its value equal to useState, and we'll initialize it with an empty string. Now here in the input box, we'll say onChange, and here we're going to say input handler, like this. Now let's create this input handler. So we'll say const input handler. It will take an event parameter, and then we can create an arrow function, and here we'll say set input e.target.value, like this. Now the next thing which we want to do is we want to submit this input. So here in the form we'll say on submit, we are going to say submit handler, like this. And now let's create a submit handler. So we'll say const submit handler is equal to, we'll create an arrow function, we'll create take the parameter event, and here we'll say e.prevent default, because by default when we submit a form it sends us to a different page, but we don't want to go to a different page, so that's why we are using e.prevent default, because in React we never need to refresh the page, we can work on the same page. Now the next thing what we need to do is we want to check if there is an input. So if input, and what we want to do is we'll log this input onto the console. So we'll say console.log input, and here we'll run some logic to add this data to Firebase. So here we'll say Firebase, or we'll say add to Firebase. So we'll add the Firebase logic at the end. Let's first style the form. For styling our form, I'm going to use style components. So open a new terminal, and here write npm install styled components, like this, press enter, and it will take a while and it will install styled components into the project. So the styled components has been installed. Now let's import this. So we'll say import styled from styled components, like this. Now what we want to do is we want to change this normal HTML div to a style div, and the way we do that is we're going to declare a variable. So we'll say const div, which will be our new div component, and we'll set it, and we'll set its value equal to styled dot div. So now this div will have all the styling which will provide, and here we have to provide the two backticks or the template literal format. You can find these backticks just above your tab button, and in here we can provide whatever CSS we want. Or for example, if we say background to yellow, like this, and we need to change this div to div, like this, and you can see that we have this yellow background around our div. So you can add whatever CSS you want here. I have already created the CSS, so I'm going to copy and paste it, and I'm going to explain it to you line by line. So we'll just copy this and we'll paste it here, like this. Now you can see that here we have set the height to 100 VH, and that is the viewport height, so that it takes up the complete height. Next, we have set the display to flex because we want to keep our form at the center. So this is a nice little trick which you can use. You can set the display to flex, and then you can set the justify content and align items to center. So this will convert the whole document into a flex box, and it will center align the element inside it. After that, we can see that we have a background. So I've used a gradient background, and then we have set the overflow to hidden so that we don't get any scroll bars. After that, let's create a container component. So we'll create a container. Again, this will be a style component. So, and we'll copy all of this from here, or rather cut all of this from here, and we will paste it inside the container component. Now let's define the container component. So we'll say const container is equal to styled dot div, like this, and here again we'll have a template literal. Now we are just setting the position to relative, and I'll tell you the reason for this later on. So right now just bear with me and set the position of this container component to relative. Now the next thing which we are going to do is to create some UI components. So let's go to the src folder, and here let's create a new file, and we'll name it UI components.js, like this. Here let's create a function. So we'll say const UI components is equal to, and we'll create an arrow function, and here we'll say return, like this. And let's export this component. So we'll say export default, and here we'll say UI components, like this. Now let's import this UI component in our app component. So here we'll say import UI component from UI components, like this. Now let's add this UI components inside the container, like this. Components, it will be self-closing. And now inside the UI components, we need to import the style components. So let's import styled from styled components, like this. Now inside the UI components, let's remove this div. We do not need the div. We can just do with React fragment. And here what we'll do is we'll create a circle component, circle, like this. Now this circle will be a style component. So let's define this. And here we can say const circle is equal to styled.div like this, and it should not give us any error, right? So now inside the circle we will copy and paste all of our CSS. So in here we'll say Control V, and you can see that we have this nice circle here. So here you can see that we have set the border radius to 50%. So this is again a trick which you can use to create circles in CSS. So if you create a div and if you give it a height and width and then set the border radius to 50%, then it will form a circle. So you can see that I've given this height and width and I have given it the border radius of 50%. We have set the overflow to hidden, which is I think not required. So let's remove this. Then we have set the background to linear gradient, and we have set the position to absolute, and we have set the top to 60% and the left to 70%. Now, the reason why I did this relative positioning in the container component was to add this position property to this component, because when we add position absolute to any element, then it positions itself to the position parent. Now, if you are not clear about CSS positions, you can click on the I button and check my video on CSS positions, and you will never have a doubt on that. Now, next we have set the Z index to 1. Now we will create another circle. So let's copy this, and here we'll say circle 2. Now to define the circle 2, what we can do is we can do const circle 2 is equal to styled, and here in the bracket we can provide the initial component so that it inherits all the styling from it like this. And here we are going to do the backticks and press semicolon, and inside the template literal we are going to copy and paste our code like this. So now you can see that we have created another circle, and here we have set the height to 150 pixels and the width to 150 pixels, and again we have just changed the top and left property. And since we are using this syntax, so all other properties are getting inherited from this circle. So this UI component is ready. Now let's go back to the app.js file, and here instead of this form we will use a style form. So for that, let's make it capital F. Now we need to define this form. So here we are going to say const form is equal to style.form, and then backticks. That's it. Now inside this we'll paste our form CSS, and you can see that our newsletter is getting the shape what we want. Now here again we have set the position to relative, and we have set the padding to 3rem, and then we are setting the minimum width to 500 pixels. We have set the border radius to 5 pixels. We have set a box shadow. Then we have set a background, which is a RGBA. Then we have this border, and then we have background clip and backdrop filter. So this is the code which you require to create, and also the box shadow. So this is the code which you require to create this Glassmorphism effect, and you can tweak the values as per you and see what works best for you. For me, I'm happy with these values, and it is giving a nice glass effect which I want. So the next thing which we can do is we want to create a h2 as well inside the form. So let's create a h2 here, and let's say subscribe to our newsletter like this. Now I also want to have this h2 as the styled h2. So again, let's make it a capital h2 with capital H, and then we can say const h2 is equal to styled dot h2 backticks, and inside the h2 we are going to define our styles like this. So we can remove this font family because I have not removed the index.css file. So we are getting this default styling and default font from here. What we want to do inside this index.css is let's add the padding to 0 and let's set the box sizing to border box. Now let's style our input component and the submit button. So here we can change this input component to a styled input like this. Again, we need to define this input. So we'll say const input is equal to styled dot input, and here we are going to copy and paste our CSS. So let's copy this and paste it. Now I'm copying and pasting everything, but for you, if you're doing this for the first time, it is highly recommended that you write all the code line by line. You pause the video and write it yourself so that you get the hang of it and get the feel of it, and that's how you get better while coding. So it's showing you an error, but it should not. So let's refresh this and you can see that we have this input like this. So you can see that we are setting the padding to 10 pixels. We are setting the border radius of left side, that is here as well as here, to 10 pixels, and this side we are setting the border radius to 0. Next we are setting the border to none. Then we are giving a width of 80% and we don't want an outline, and we are setting the color to this one so that when we write something you can see that we get this nice color which is consistent with our design. Now to create this button, let's convert this regular HTML button to the styled button like this. Now let's define it. So here we'll say const button is equal to styled dot button, dot button like this. Let's copy the CSS and paste it here like this. And you can see that the button has got the styling, but we want this button to be here. And the reason it is not like this is probably the index.css file. And here, instead of this body, what we want is we want to have the styling for all of our elements like this. And now you can see that we are getting this nice integrated input box with this submit button. So let me quickly tell you what the CSS inside the submit button is all about. So you can see that we are setting the linear gradient and then we are setting the width to 20%. So here for the input box we had set the width to 80%, and now for the button we are setting the width to 20% so that they take up the complete space. Then we are setting the padding to 10px, which is same as that of our input box. And then we are setting the text line to center, the text transform to uppercase. Then we have some transition. And then we are setting this background size so that we get the kind of effect which we want. And then the color to white, we are setting some border radius, again only on the right side. For the input element, we set the border radius only on the left side, and now we are setting on the right side. Actually it should be 10px, so let's make it 10px like this. Yeah, so we have 10px on left side for the input box and 10px on the right side on the button. So the way the border radius works is it goes clockwise. So the first number is the border radius of this corner, then the second corner, third corner, and the fourth corner. 1, 2, 3, 4, like this. Now we have set the border to none, outline to none, and then the cursor to pointer. And we have given this nice hover effect. So when we hover over it, you can see that the background shifts a bit like this. And that's how we create this awesome newsletter sign up component. Now let's create the Firebase logic so that we can capture the email which is entered by the user. So for that, let's go into Firebase, firebase.google.com. Then you go on to console. So you can go to console like this. And here you can click on add project. Now give a project name. So we will say email, or we'll say newsletter demo, like this. Let's continue. I don't want Google Analytics for it. Let's create project like this. And it will take a while, and once it is done, you can click on continue. And then what we can do is we can add this web app here, and here we'll give an app name. So let's give it anything, for example, newsletter, like this, newsletter demo, and then we can register the app. Here you can see this, we are getting some message. We don't care about it because we will do it manually. So just continue to console like this. Now here you can see that you have one app. So click on this, and here you will see your app, and click on this settings tab, and you will go onto the project settings, and in here go down, and here click on config, copy this. And now what we want to do is we want to create a file in our src folder, and let's name it firebase.js, like this. And let's copy this config. So let's paste this config here. So paste it here like this. Now for this to work, what we need to do is we need to install Firebase in our project. So for that, we are going to do, let's go to the terminal and say npm install Firebase, like this. Press enter, and this will install Firebase in our project. Now before installing Firebase in our project, you also need to install Firebase tools globally. For that, the command is npm install -g for global, because you need to install Firebase tools globally, and then Firebase tools, like this. But since I have already done, so I'll not do it again. If you have not installed this Firebase tools globally, you need to do it. So let's remove this. I'm sorry. You can see that the Firebase has been installed in our project. So in our firebase.js, what we'll do is we will import Firebase from Firebase/app, like this. We also need to import the Firestore. So we'll say import Firestore, or rather it will be Firebase/Firestore, like this. Now what we need to do is we need to initialize our app. So here we'll say const Firebase app, or you can name it whatever you want, is equal to Firebase.initialize app. Let's close this so that we have some more screen space. Initialize app, and here we need to pass this object, this Firebase config. So we'll say Firebase config, like this. Now the project has been initialized, or the app has been initialized. Now the next thing which we need to do is need to create a database. So for that, let's do const db is equal to Firebase app dot firestore, like this. Now let's export this db. So we'll say export default db, like this. Okay, where is this 0 from? Now let's import this db into our app component. So let's go to the app component here, and we will import this db. So import db from /Firebase, like this. Now what we need to do is we need to add db.collection And here we'll create a new collection and we'll name it emails like this. And in the collections, we will add our data. So we'll say dot add, and we'll add the data in object form. So here we'll say email to input like this. And we also want to create a timestamp so that we know when the email was added. So we'll create time. And the way we use Firebase timestamp is we do Firebase dot firestore dot field value dot server timestamp like this. Okay, this should be comma like this. Now we also need to import Firebase, so let's import it. We are going to say import Firebase from Firebase/app like this. And now before we add something to our React project, we need to create this Firestore in our Firebase console as well. So let me just make it larger. Here, open the menu, and in here you can see that we have this Cloud Firestore. So click on this Cloud Firestore. And now you can see that we have this Create Database button. So click on this. And we want to do it in test mode. So click on Start Test Mode and then do Next like this. And we need to set the server. It doesn't matter, leave it, set it to whatever you want. And I will leave it at US Central, and we'll set it to enable like this. It will take a while, and once it is done, you can see a page like this. So here you will be able to see your collections as well as your data. So let me fix it here. And now if I go on to our React application, which we have just created, let's close this one. So now if I add an email here, so let's add some email, test@123.com like this. If I click on submit, we are getting an error, and it's showing that firestore.fieldValue.server timestamp is not a function. So let me just check what wrong I have done. Okay, the timestamp should be like this. It should be a small s. And now if we click on submit, we did not get any error. So hopefully it should get submitted here. And now refresh this Firebase database. And you can see that we have this collection emails, and here we have this document, and you can see this email test@123, and then we have this time. Now we have some errors in the app, so let's fix this. So although they are not visible errors, but actually we have not done our two-way binding here. So let's do value equal to input like this, so that our state and the value inside our input component are in sync. We also need to do one more thing. So when we have submitted this to the collection, let's clear this. So we are going to do set input and we'll set it to an empty string like this. Now if we refresh this, if we add something else, say test2@123.com, click on submit, and now you can see that the field is cleared and the second address is added to our Firebase. Now what we can do is we can also show a message that our form has been submitted. So let's create a message. So let's create a state for our message. So we'll say const message and then set message, and we'll set its value equal to useState like this. And when we have set the input to a null string, what we want to do is we want to set the message to thank you for subscribing like this. And we also want to run a set timeout, so we'll say set timeout, and in here we will create a function, and here we'll set the message back to an empty string after a delay of 3 seconds like this. Now inside the container, let's create a component alert that will be our style component like this. And what we want to do is we want to show our message here, message like this. Now let's define this alert. So here we'll say const alert is equal to styled.p. Let's make it a paragraph element. Style.p, let's make it a paragraph element, then backticks, semicolon like this. Now inside the backticks, we are going to define our CSS styles. So let me just copy and paste it. Let's copy this, let's paste it, and you can see that we are getting this nice little box here. So what we want is we want to display this message box only when we have some message. So what we can do is we can wrap this in curly braces, and here we'll say message and like this. So whenever we have a message, then only we will render out this alert component. And inside the alert component, you can see that we are setting the position to relative, we are setting some margin and padding, we are setting the color to white, then we are giving text align font size, we are setting some font family, which we don't need to. And then we are setting the border radius, the background, and then backdrop filter to create that Glassmorphism effect. Then we have the z index to 3 so that it is on the top. Now, if we write something here, for example, test3@123.com, if we press enter, you can see that we are getting this nice message here, which automatically goes off after 3 seconds. And if we go on to our Firebase database, you can see that it is added. So you can see test2, we have test3. And this is how we can create this awesome newsletter form using React and Firebase. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you learned something, press the like button, and if you're new here, consider subscribing because I keep on bringing such videos regularly.